All right, we are live on YouTube. Wonderful. Let me just adjust my seat here. Welcome, welcome. Hope you guys are having a great Friday. Let's turn on Instagram here. Mm, And we are live on Instagram. Welcome, my friends. Happy Friday. Hope you all are doing well. I wanted to jump on here and touch on a topic that you all seem very much interested in, and it's on the 6 signs that your blood sugar is spiking and crashing, right? And there's so many, I think, different types of symptoms or signs that could come up. I'm going to talk about the top 6 that we typically see in our practice. And then from there, maybe a few other nuances with that as well. But essentially, what you are experiencing when you have spikes and crashes is really just a lack of stability overall. And the best way that I know how to explain that is with building a fire. And so maybe some of you guys who are joining, if you've built a fire before, maybe when you're camping or maybe when you're at your place and you built a little bonfire, for some people, they start off with like twigs and maybe newspaper and just to kind of get it going, like that kindling, right? Where it shoots up, and then eventually you put some more, wood on that to keep it going, right? Essentially, with someone who is getting blood sugar spikes, where it's spiking and then crashing back down, is we're lacking that stability. And it's very similar to that first kind of fire I was talking about, where you're putting gas in the fire, you're putting newspaper and little twigs, and it shoots up and it goes up really fast, right? Big flames. But as quick as it goes up, it fizzles out very quickly because there's nothing that is working on it, right? You have nothing to feed it with. And that's essentially what somebody is experiencing when they have blood sugar issues. They don't have that consistent source of energy. It's very variable all throughout the day, or even into the like early morning, when you're sleeping. What am I trying to say? During when you're sleeping, which leads to symptoms as well. And that's probably where I'll start actually. When we look at like signs that your blood sugar is spiking and crashing, a good sign that you just don't have that stability is when you're waking up frequently during the middle of the night. Maybe it's 1 a.m., maybe it's 2 a.m., maybe it's 3 a.m., 4 a.m., whatever it is. For many, it's all of those. For some, it's one of those. For some, it's multiple, right? And you might wake up frequently, or it might be accompanied by you having to use the bathroom, right? I remember it would have been like what 15 years ago at this point where I would wake up like at least 5 times during the middle of the night, at least 5 times to use the bathroom. My bladder was just so full. Um, and I didn't know what was going on. Like I wasn't drinking water right, all day long. And I was peeing like 5 times a night and then like 20 times throughout the day, which we'll actually get to in a second. But, what we know about that is when our blood sugar is in balance, spiking and crashing, our body doesn't have a consistent source of energy to draw from. Similar to how your car operates on gas or electricity, when it runs out of that fuel source, well, it's hard to make that car run, no matter if it's a Ferrari, a Rolls Royce, or a Honda, right? So it's important that our body has consistent access to energy in order to function and feel good, or in this case, like sleep through the night. And when we don't have access to that, or our body can't access it, what ends up happening is we have to switch over to stress hormones to get that energy, right? And in itself, it's not a bad thing, but the bad comes in when we're using that excessively. And what I mean by excessively, what I mean is we're waking up in the middle of the night, right? Because stress hormones can be alerting, they can make us wake up from a deep sleep, but then they can also act as a diuretic, meaning your body, you pee more frequently, right? And so when you get the combination of those, it tells us that our body's probably living on that stress pathway a little bit too much, right? And then of course we don't get very restful sleep. No one does when they're waking up, multiple times throughout the night, right? So that is at play, and that's something that we see consistently as well. The other thing that we see is during the day. If you cannot go long without meals, if you have to eat every hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and if you don't, you get hangry, anxious, heart palpitations, shaky, dizzy, lightheaded, like those types of symptoms, it tells us that, again, your body doesn't have a consistent, reliable, sustaining source of energy. It's lacking, going back to the fire example, it's lacking those dry, dense logs, the ones that you put on the fire, that you put it on, you let it sit for hours and hours, and it still burns. Like, we don't have that, right? And so it's really important for those that are spiking and crashing that we build that, because not only does that lead to more stability, more sustaining meals, but it also leads to the ability to sleep through the night without having to wake up, right? Because we have that energy to operate from. And if we don't have that, then of course we have symptoms in multiple different areas. I will say after the meal, depending on the person, this can lead to more of that tiredness, especially when you're spiking, like more of some people might describe it like a food coma, or needing a nap, or sleepiness, sluggishness, tiredness, the afternoon sort of crash type of feeling. That tends to happen for many clients that are in this state. Or if you're more, you know, uh, more apt to crash, like literally crash, where you're feeling like shaky and dizzy and lightheaded, that can also happen maybe an hour or two after the meal for some clients as well. It just depends on their background. That would be more of the clients that are, more apt to struggle with hypoglycemia, right? So we have those pieces that are more symptom based. We also have more of like the numerical number based, the lab values, right? Things like weight loss. We see that clients in this state really, really struggle to lose weight, even if they're doing a lot of the right things. They're eating whole foods, they're staying active, they're managing their stress, they're doing all these healthy things, yet they're not able to lose weight. And they've done the diets before, they've cut out the food groups before, and it still hasn't led to that sustainable weight loss. Well, one of the big things that people that are spiking and crashing, what's underneath that oftentimes is, like we talked about, a little bit of a high stress response, but also too some circadian rhythm hormone imbalances. What do I mean by that? Hormones, that basically refer to as your circadian rhythm, dictate your body's ability to lose weight, have stable and consistent energy, have a healthy appetite, stabilize your blood sugar, right? Have a healthy metabolism, all those different things. But if our circadian rhythm is disrupted because we have a poor light environment, we're not getting consistently outside, I should say, and then maybe in the evening or early morning we're getting exposed to a lot of artificial lights from computers or phones like this, or a ring light like that, or indoor lighting, all those different things. Basically, it disrupts our ability to produce the very hormones that we need to get the signal to our brain to say, hey, we should, lose weight. We should, support and stimulate our metabolism. We should support and stimulate appetite, right? We should support and stimulate energy. We should support and stimulate our ability to sleep through the night, right? Those kinds of things kind of go off. And so if we don't have that hormonal balance, and it's due to our living environment, it's going to be near impossible to be able to lose weight in this kind of state. And one of those hormones is known as leptin. Leptin is a hormone that is supportive to energy levels, insulin sensitivity, weight loss, appetite, and metabolism. And so, if that is off, then it's really going to be hard to lose weight. And it is one of those things that really controls insulin sensitivity. And so, if you're more leptin resistant, we call it, very similar to insulin resistance, where, in insulin resistance, our body is not quite able to use insulin despite us having a lot of it around, similar to like a key that used to work inside a doorknob but no longer does. It's very similar to that. It doesn't produce the action of opening that door that we want it to. And so it's the same thing with insulin resistance. It causes more of higher blood sugar. With leptin resistance, that's kind of what controls all these metabolic pathways that dictate our ability to stabilize our blood sugar. And so when that's off, again, very hard to lose weight, but also hard to regulate things like glucose levels or even A1C levels, which is a 3-month average of your blood sugar. And so sometimes, depending on the spectrum, we work with clients of all spectrums, sometimes at the beginning where maybe they don't have like high blood sugar markers just yet. They don't have a high glucose or high A1C or high insulin, all the way up to people with like type 2 diabetes that have all of those, right? So we can be on this sort of spectrum. It just depends on where we're at. But all these foundational pieces going to supporting that person no matter where they are on the spectrum, right? And of course, everything is individualized based on their history and based on what is causing that. But it's a huge piece because sometimes we won't see A1C be high. But when we look at more in detail, we might see their insulin levels be really high. And that's kind of at the beginning stages of someone's glucose or A1C going up. We're just kind of meeting it a little bit earlier and we're preventing that versus, excuse me, versus for some people with the type 2 diabetes already, we're kind of at that level already. We have the high A1C, we have the high insulin, we have the high glucose, and it's just more there to work with in terms of bringing it back down versus the other person, we're just a little bit earlier in that stage. And so that's where for some people it can be invalidating too, because they don't have the lab to support necessarily how their symptoms are showing up, and that may or may not show up in like a blood glucose monitors, but it will definitely with something we call the HTMA, which is a hair tissue mineral analysis test. It shows us, basically what is happening at the cell level. And think about it like this: it's something that can, we can see blood sugar issues show up before they show up in blood sugar markers. So insulin, glucose, A1C, anything that happens at the HTMA level will happen first before it happens at the blood level. So that can give us a lot of validation to say, hey, yes, you do have this going on. This is the reason why. And balancing those minerals can be really key to being able to do that, which, isn't necessarily part of the conversation of today, but we talk about that a lot, right? So nutrients like minerals are very key to stabilizing these blood sugar swings. So you're feeling more energized, you're feeling more stable, more satisfied for longer. And that's the other thing that, kind of end with too. Whenever we're having these fluctuations of blood sugar all day long, it's normal to be, to not feel great, especially in terms of energy, where you're sluggish, you're tired, you're exhausted, you're burnt out, and you really just don't have that resilience, right? And you're not able to exercise as much. Or when you do exercise, it really tanks you, it really crashes you, right? So we have a lot of those things, and we find a lot of clients, it takes them a lot of energy to be able to do simple things. We're wrapping up with another client who was in this space at the beginning. She was raising three kids under the age of 10 at home. And you could probably imagine, if you're a mom, like what kind of energy that takes on a daily basis. And she was coming in this space feeling very burnt out. And now, like, none of the circumstances have changed. She didn't lose one of her kids or anything. Like, her kids are still there, but she gained the resilience and that energy back by focusing on this blood sugar stability piece that now allows her to have consistent source of energy so she can do anything that she wants, including intensive exercise, right? So this is really key for doing all those sorts of things. But I will say too, a lot of our clients, because of their experience, whether that's the crashes or the spikes, they get more anxious around food, right? They question, how their body's going to respond to something, worry how it's going to affect their blood sugar, right? When they check, or how they feel after the meal, and it really controls them. They don't have that freedom anymore. But when they're able to stabilize their blood sugar, automatically it's not something that they worry about anymore. They don't have that food anxiety because they know that they're stable. And that's what happens for many of our clients. And it's awesome to see, because I think there's so many other important pieces of life than just worrying about where your blood sugar is at. And if we can take one more worry away from you, I think there's it just leads to more freedom in all different aspects, right? So I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you some perspective around this, especially around what the problem truly is, which is an inconsistent source of energy. That really what it boils down to. And when we can gain that consistent source of energy, where again, that fire that we talked about, it's continuing to burn, whether we're eating or we're not. We have those dry, dense logs in that fire. So it doesn't matter if we skip a meal. It doesn't matter if we miss a lunch or miss a snack. We're still going to feel great, and we're still going to sleep great, right? Many people at the beginning, they're very sensitive. They miss a snack, they miss a meal, the balance is off. They're not eating the right types. There's one ingredient in that meal that's different. It causes a crash. They have more of a stressful day, causes a crash. They have more of a intensive exercise, causes a crash, right? So we want that stability, and by building that stability, it allows you to stay stable, irregardless of what you're doing: stress, carbs, exercise, and otherwise, right? So hope that's helpful. We'll be tuning. I'm not sure when the next live that we'll do, but stay tuned for the next one that comes out. This will be the same time that we talk about some of these things. But if you have any questions about this particular topic, just put those down below. I hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and we will talk soon on the next live.